What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, for another episode of the UNC Basketball Show, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And, AJ, we got an action – I said this about the football show we recorded on Wednesday, but we got an action-packed show ahead and really just a lot to dissect. We're recording this on Thursday evening. Duke game's coming up on Saturday. We're going to hit on that, and we're going to also hit on the Wake Forest game a little bit later as well, because AJ's got an interesting take on that I'm excited for you guys to hear, and I haven't heard it either, so I'm excited to hear it myself. And then we're
raw.
Yeah,
I love it, mate.
Like
my radio days, raw radio, baby.
You know how we do it. We don't really plan for this. We just kind of come in and see what happens. So we're also going to talk about the loss to Pittsburgh a little bit more. That happened on Wednesday night, disappointing loss for the Tar Heels. And I think a lot to dissect from it. I know you and Brandon did Three Things video. You've also written a ton about it. So we're not going to sit here and harp on it for too long, but we're going to more so talk about kind of what it means. And even more than that, kind of what we learned from the loss last night. Because I do think there is a lot to take away from it, probably more on the negative side than there is positive wise. But AJ, let's start with the Pittsburgh game. And I'm going to come out and just flat out say it, and I'm going to kick it to you in a second. I thought Pittsburgh rolled into Chapel Hill and punked Carolina on their own court. And what I mean by punked, for those people who some people maybe not exactly know what that means, is I thought Pittsburgh, from basically minute 1 to 40, was the more physical team. They were definitely the more energetic team. They were the team that it almost felt like, and I was not there, but you can agree with this or disagree with this. It almost felt like they were the home team, the way they were playing, the energy they had, the fight that they had. It almost felt like they were in their comfort zone more than the Tar Heels were in it. But on the flip side, too, it felt like Pittsburgh had that motivation of, hey, we've beaten you 2 times before. We've already beaten you once this season. We're going to come into your own house, steal your cookies, and leave. And that's exactly what they did. So I want to get your take on the loss, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about it yet. Because for me, like I said, I think last night's loss, not just because it was a loss, AJ, but the way in which Carolina lost yet again to a Pittsburgh team who I think has the blueprint now on how to beat the Tar Heels, which we'll talk about later. I think that's more of the concern than just it being another loss for the Tar Heels on the season.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that Pittsburgh was the aggressor and they dictated.
Yeah. All game.
So they could have played the game in Guam and they would have been the aggressor and they would have dictated. They could have played the game in Bangladesh. They would have been the aggressor and they would have dictated. So they did that in Oakland, which is a little area, which is where the university is located up there in Pittsburgh. And they did that in Chapel Hill. And they did that last year in Chapel Hill. So, there's only 3 teams that have ever won 3 games in a row, 3 trips in a row in the Smith Center. And one of them now is Pittsburgh.
I know. It's hard to believe,
the first two teams in this 3-game stretch weren't anywhere close to the NCAA tournament. This team will make the tournament. I actually think they're built to make a run. There are a lot of ways to look at what happened Wednesday night, and I think for the most part, there's a lot of negatives. A couple things to address what you said. Punked. Some people are going to take issue with that because they're going to say, well, gosh, they would have lost by 1 point if they just hit 2 more free throws, or if one of Caleb's or one of RJ's threes go in, they win. I'm not looking at it that way, because I'm with you in the sense that there's a reason they lost last night, because a lot of stuff didn't go well from beginning to end. When I asked Hubert, I said, outside of the outcome, what element of the game from your team disappointed you the most? And he didn't give me one answer. He gave me a bunch, because it was all encompassing. And that's the thing. To lose that game, as well as they have been playing, and they've been playing well, and they had been getting better. They had been ascending on a consistent basis for a while. To have a week off and then take a step back like that and get beaten in the manner and look like they did back in November and early December, and not match another team's intensity consistently, which is what Hubert said last night, which is what Armando said last night, which is what Caleb said last night, which is what Pete said last night. They're the only 3 players we got to talk to afterward. So the 4 people in the program we talked to afterward all said that. So it's not a slight to them. They were beaten. They were out physical. They were out energized. They were out intensified. They were outsmarted. They were out willed. They were out everything. And as a result, they lost by 1 point. So if you want to do a glasses half full sidebar here for a moment, wow, look how good this team could be when they're terrible in a lot of areas. And Pittsburgh played about as well as it can. And Pitt only wins by a point. Carolina lost by 1 point. They had 19 offensive rebounds, only 13 second chance points. They had 1 steal last night. They have been averaging about 6.5 or so, 7 per game, the last 10 games coming in, which is a significant upgrade from earlier in the year. They had 5 fast break points last night, and they lost by a point. So you could say, wow, boy, if they really just this, and this happens, they really are going to make that run, and that all might happen.
Yeah, good.
But last night was a step back. It was a step back because a year ago, when they weren't playing that well, but they were stacking up some wins, BC, Virginia Tech, at Clemson, at Louisville, I was saying, look, they just need to win. Win, get traction going, and you're going to get better by virtue of winning. Last night, they not only needed to win, but they needed to play well. This team should be judged differently than the club a year ago at this time. A, because of what we've seen they can do. They've proven it. B, because of their stated mission, which hasn't gone away. I mean, they said it, so they still have to be judged by that. And number 3, because the expectation is this club should be something more than what they have been so far. Nobody really had that expectation a year ago. You and I talked every once in a while, and I said a few times, boy, they remind me of UCLA a year earlier. And I said, I still think there's something there, but nobody foresaw what ended up happening. Now they're being judged by doing that again, running it back. But they haven't really come close to looking like that team. So last night was a matter of not just win, but win and play well. You see contending teams occasionally host a really good other team, and they pound them. Because that's what contending teams do. Go back and look at the scores of all the Carolinas contending teams in the past. They had a few games every year, which the Pittsburghs of the world come in. And I'm talking about Pittsburgh 2023, which is an NCAA tournament team, and they pound them. 18 points, 20 points, whatever it is. This team needed to show another gear. And they not only didn't show that gear, but they put it in reverse, and they went backwards. So Pete said yes. When I asked him, is this a step backward? He said, yes, if we allow it to be. And I think that's the key. Armando, yes, if we allow it to be. I think that's the key. But I do think that there was probably an uncomfortable day there because everybody was to blame. I mean, some of the things, I think Hubert can be criticized for some things last night. And Armando's their ACC Player of the Year and acknowledged that he didn't know if they had a timeout left or not when he traveled, which is why he didn't call timeout there. You got to know that. The coaches need to make sure that some assistant coach needs to remind them all the time in those situations, because there was a timeout with 44 seconds left. Because Hinson misses a shot, Caleb gets the rebound, 46 seconds. They call timeout at 44, and at 27 seconds, Armando travels, which I also thought that they tried to get something too quickly there as well.
Agreed, yeah.
So there's a lot of blame to go around. Yeah, it could be a learning situation for them. February 1st at home, when you've won 10 out of 12 and you have that cloud still hanging over based on national perception, and you should have a chip on your shoulder, that shouldn't happen. But maybe the chip really isn't there yet. Maybe last night will create a chip. I don't know. But if there was a real big chip there, and if they had been humbled enough, I think there would have been more fight there last night. So Carolina fans have a reason to be a little bit concerned, in my opinion. And I'm the guy who's been saying more than anybody else that they were ascending, that they still were positioning themselves to maybe make that push. Right now, I'm going to back off that a little bit. They need to show something new here in the next couple of weeks. Yeah,
it definitely doesn't get any easier for them, too. And I want to, again, we're not going to harp on this game too long because we've already talked about it in other segments and, wrote about it a ton. But I want to talk and ask you about the toughness aspect of it, because you wrote a column last night, and this is where I got this from, and I love where you went with it. And go check it out. It's on our website, tarlestrade.com, links below. You kind of wrote something along the lines of, Caleb Love mentioned a couple weeks ago about teams thinking Carolina's soft, and that's the word he used. Soft was the word he used to describe it. Yeah, sweet, excuse me. And I thought they looked sweet on Wednesday night against Pittsburgh. I thought that was the prime definition of a Pittsburgh team who probably, and based on some of the things that were said behind, in the Smith Center bowels after Pittsburgh won the game, that I think it's pretty easy to say that not only does Pittsburgh not like, and for multiple different facets, which we won't dive into in here, doesn't like Carolina as a program and definitely loves to beat them and kind of has a chip on their shoulder when it comes to playing the Tar Heels. But we saw Carolina be soft last night, and we saw them only really match Pittsburgh's energy for a couple minutes, maybe during the game in spurts. And, one of it, which in the second half, when I think Cummings, dropped 9 straight on RJ Davis's head. And I think RJ made a couple nice plays after that and started jawing a little bit. And I think the only reason that happens is because, a guy dropped 9 straight on RJ. So of course you expect a little bit of a response to that. But for me, and my question to you is and the reason I'm asking you this is because I've seen this a lot on Twitter today and on social media and the message boards and stuff about Caleb saying this team's sweet. A lot of people thinking this team's sweet and they don't feel like they are. Pittsburgh kind of coming in, showing the blueprint of how to beat the Tar Heels, of slow the game down, make it a fight, make it a very physical game, make it chippy, and Carolina's not going to respond very well to that, and you're going to have a chance to beat them. A lot of people are saying on Twitter that, we've talked about this team ascending, and it took a step down yesterday, but about this team, it can still do something in the tournament because of what happened last year. That's what we're basing it off of. The run that Carolina made last year, very similar to what we've seen this year in a lot of ways. Everybody's kind of banking on that happening again, but a lot of people on Twitter are now saying, maybe this is just who this team is. And I think that's a valid question to ask because it is February 2nd. I know the Pittsburgh loss at home came on February 16th, I think. So there is time. We did see it happen later in the year. We did see Carolina kind of flip a switch after that. But is there a concern, and should it be a legitimate concern that, okay, Carolina knows that people view them as sweet. They've responded and had some games where they've kind of stepped up and shown that they're not, but they've also had some games, just look at the 2 Pittsburgh games this year, where they've kind of reflected that, yeah, maybe they are, if you approach the game opponent-wise in the right way. You can kind of make this team look sweet by playing them in a certain type of manner. Do you think it's a legitimate concern that, AJ, maybe it's just who this team is? Maybe they aren't going to just make this miraculous run out of nowhere. Maybe we're just basing that off of what happened last year. It's hard to replicate something like that. And I think that's a legitimate concern and frustration among Carolina fans right now.
Well, to clarify what Caleb was saying, is after the Notre Dame game, they had to get a little rugged that afternoon to beat the Irish. And Caleb said, people think we sweep, but we're not. So last week up at Syracuse, when we were talking to Caleb in the hallway outside the locker room after the game, he was reminded of that. And I said, you okay if people still think you're sweet? He said, yeah, I'm okay with that. Now, I think that they've made a lot of improvements in that area. I don't think this team is sweet. I just think that they haven't yet reached the point of physicality and toughness that Pittsburgh exudes. I think Pittsburgh's level of toughness and physicality is up here when Syracuse is here. So to get from here to here means you've got to match Pittsburgh. I don't think that they're there yet as that team. They're there to beat Syracuse. They're there to beat Ohio State. They're there to beat Michigan. They were there to beat NC State a couple of weeks ago, but they're not there yet to beat Pittsburgh. The proof is the fact that Pitt's beat them 3 straight times. Yeah. They beat them 3 times in the last 11 and a half months.
I think Capel's undefeated in the Smith Center, I think, since he took over. Something crazy like that.
Yeah,
something
I think so.
Like that. I think he
yeah, because I think 19 was the last win there, or when 18 or 19 was the crazy Cam Johnson game.
Yeah,
that was Kevin.
Always something with Pitt in Chapel Hill.
What a jerk Kevin Stallings is. Good gracious. Yeah. Anyway, and I don't mind saying that because I'll never have to run into him again. But what an absolute jerk.
Yeah.
So, and Cameron was far more the more mature adult in that situation by far. Big time respect for Cameron, by the way. So, maybe we don't know what's going to happen.
I know that's the thing, yeah.
So because of what happened last year. I think it's dangerous for people to think, well, they're just going to strike a match and go up in flames and tear through March again. I don't. My whole thing is that that's not what this team is. My whole thing is that when I said about a month ago, well, they're really building their 2023 thing now because they had to cut the cord to last year. And one of the reasons they had to cut the cord to last year was because that mentality was we're going to catch lightning in a bottle. And that's all that really was. They had to become that team now to win a title. You're not going to catch lightning in a bottle twice. You have to become that team if you're going to, quote unquote, run it back, right? Or you're going to, quote unquote, get redemption. And what they showed Wednesday night was it was a step backwards in their quest to become that team because they're not there yet. That's why I said not only they need to win, they need to play really well. A year ago, this time I was saying they just need to win games. And stuff will come. They can't get to those other spots until they win some games first, and then they'll navigate their way to improving and playing at a higher level. But at that point, they just need wins because that week at Miami and Wake took so much out of them psychologically. They need to repair that. Right now, they haven't had that kind of loss. They haven't been blown out by anybody, but they've had head scratchers, and the head scratchers have been a club that has put it on the line publicly, said championship or bust multiple times. A club that talks about where individuals talk about their NBA futures, where they think, we're North Carolina, we're supposed to be this, we're supposed to be that. Suddenly you wake up on February 2nd, they're 15-7, and they're 7-4 in a very weak ACC. And they have two good wins over what would be over absolute NCAA tournament team. They have two good wins right now. I would say that the national people would say beating NC State's a good win. Wolfpack is impressive. And beating College of Charleston because they're rolling through the CAA, even though they lost last weekend. So they need to accumulate good wins. And they've had opportunities, but they lose at Virginia Tech. I don't care that Armando didn't play. They still lost that game. Yeah. They were in position to win at Pitt the first time, didn't do it. They couldn't guard the dribble drive. They were in position to win at Virginia, and they didn't do it. Okay, so those are learning things, and they didn't have Armando for two of those. They didn't have Pete for one of them as well. So they find themselves now on February 2nd, at least looking in the mirror and recognizing, okay, we need to still assimilate Pete. 22 games in, we still need to work that out. 22 games in, Caleb needs to find a stroke. He's done it a little bit the last two games, but his shot selection they had 4 shots last night that were essentially turnovers.
Yeah,
he's got to be smart. When he starts playing with the hair on fire, then he's going to start making mistakes, and he did that some last night. He hit some big shots, but he also killed a few possessions as well. And when he's a disciplined player, he's a fantastic player if the ball goes to the basket. He really is. I've been praising his court play and him losing himself in the team stuff. But last night there were some possessions where that just wasn't the case. So he's got to get back to being that guy. And the other thing is the lunch pail, the hard hat stuff. They've just got to be tougher. Armando talks about bully ball. I remember they won up at Pitt during the COVID year when there was nobody in the building, and Armando was really good that night. And I remember afterward he was talking about, well, Pitt likes to play bully ball, but we out-bullied them. Well, that Pitt team was terrible, all right? Yeah. They didn't have the grown men that Pitt has now all over the place. And 3 times in a row now, Pitt's won the bully ball game. So Carolina needs to improve in its bully ball stuff because they're going to need that, not just to advance in the tournament. I wouldn't even worry about right now. They need that Saturday night in Durham. They need that next Tuesday in Winston-Salem. When Clemson comes in, they're going to play bully ball.
Yeah.
Miami's going to come in and try to play quick and spread them out and try to make Carolina go small. Hubert's going to have to decide, do I switch with Armando and Pete? Do we have them switch and guard guards? Do you really want Pete guarding Isaiah Wong driving the lane like he got caught in some switches last night? There are a lot of decisions that Hubert has to make. And I think last night was one of those deals where you open it up and you see all the warts. Everything that they need to get better at was on display last night. And so they must begin that process here on February 2nd in showing up a lot of those areas. And they don't have a lot of time left to do it. 9 games, only 4 home games.
I mean,
and my dog, if you can hear my dog, I think agrees. Either that or we're getting invaded by Amazon or FedEx again. I swear, Amazon and FedEx and UPS wait. Like there's some little light that goes on above my house, like the bat light, the bat night light that lets those guys know that AJ's doing a podcast right now. So let's pull into the neighborhood so his dogs go crazy.
You got to love it, man. It really does work out like that. I've had instances like that over here in my house too, where anything that doesn't happen usually always happens when you're recording a podcast. So But yeah, AJ, and who knows? I mean, we saw a similar thing last year where Carolina kind of started to figure it out when they made a trip to Durham, and you got a trip to Durham coming up right now. So again, I know a lot of negatives we kind of talked about there, and I think that's right. I think there's a lot of negatives that came out of last night, and I think that's kind of how the fan base is feeling. But again, to focus on some of the positive, there's still time. That loss to Pittsburgh last year that really felt like it was kind of the end of the road for the Tar Heels before they turned it around happened on February 16th. So it's only February 2nd. There is still
they went on the road right
around.
away, and they beat Virginia Tech on the road.
Yeah. So there is still time.
And the vibe around them was completely different 4 days
later.
later.
God, it flipped like crazy, man. So
that's the beauty of college basketball. Think about how devastated Kansas fans were 10 days ago, a week ago. And now look at them. They've gone to Kentucky and they pounded Kansas State. So things can change very quickly in college basketball. This team has all the tools to flip the script very quickly. And perhaps we look back and say, you know what, that Pitt game was an important fork in the road moment for this club.
Yeah.
Because everything is right in front of them. There's no mystery to what they need to do to become a contender. They don't have to look around the room and ask each other, boy, share your thoughts. We're looking for anything, guys. No needle in the haystack here. It is right in front of them. And that's a good thing. So if you're a Carolina fan, you should at least think in those terms. Say, okay, now they know. Now it's completely up to them, Hubert, the staff, the players, to fix that stuff and make something of this season.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And, again, we'll kind of see what happens, but it's so hard to write them off because of what happened last year. It really is. It's just so hard to write them off because you got that core back, added some nice pieces, some young talent, but it is hard to.
The landscape of college basketball being what it is, there's 35, 40 teams out there right now I wouldn't write off.
No, 100%. 100%, man.
Because everybody's still in the formation process. It's not the finished product. There are some finished products. And those are clubs that are going to slip. There are some really, who knows? Maybe Purdue is as good as some people think they are. I still think, let's see what happens in Bloomington this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt.
I see that game because I think Indiana, until the other night, they've been playing really well again. So, there are a lot of teams that could catch fire. That's why you have to keep improving. You have to get better every day, and you have to play your bench some more, and you have to run the offense through the post. And you have to play with a little bit more vigor and all those things. It ain't rocket science what this club needs to do. And if they do that, they're more experienced and they're talented and they've got a high level of skill and everything else. They should be able to beat everybody on their schedule and everybody they match up with from this point on. It's up to them.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. AJ, real quickly before we move on to the talking about Duke and Wake Forest a little bit, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, sponsoring all the UNC basketball shows we've done so far. I think this is episode 10. And that's the Rogue Shop. Sponsored a bunch of podcasts back before we even started the UNC basketball as well. But check them out, rogueshop.com, specialized in top shelf, family grown hemp products. So what that means is, CBD, Delta 8, Delta 9. There's even more Deltas out there I'm not going to name. Tinctures, oils, gummies, candies, creams, flour, whatever you're into, however you like to consume these products, you use these products, you can guarantee that not only do they have it, but they have the top of the line stuff. Again, it's all family grown. You know where it's coming from. And AJ, I've harped on this over the last 2 shows. The packaging's fantastic. I don't know why I didn't talk about it earlier because I got a care package with them months ago. And that was the first thing that stood out. Not only did it look nice, but there's the attention to detail, a couple little free things in there, wrapped up nice, just really, really packaged very impressively. So guys, for me, they're top shelf, not only in their products, but in everything they do. So make sure you check them out. Links below, rogueshop.com. Use that promo code as well. Tar Heels 10 to save. You'll see it on the graphic. We always pop up on these ad reads. But again, just click the link below. It'll take you right over there and use that promo code Tar Heels 10 to save on your next order. Big shout out to the Rogue Shop for continuing to sponsor.
I need to get more cream.
Yeah. Hey, man.
I'm out of it. My shoulder hurts, so I need more cream.
Yeah, you got to get it, man. I have a few friends and family who order that stuff like it's nothing. So they got plenty of it. But yeah, get you some more, man. That stuff really does work. I've got multiple people who will vouch for that, including yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So yeah, again, make sure you use that promo code to save. Tar Heels 10. Links below. Big shout out to the Rogue Shop. All right, AJ, it's the big one. It's Duke. It's Carolina in Durham. I actually drove through. I live in Durham. I drove through Shesheskyville. And let me say this too. Big shout out. I don't know if you saw this, but big shout out to Brett Friedlander, good friend of the program. who put out they should not change the name now, but threw out kind of a different name to maybe change it to. And I think it was Chi-Town, Chi-Town. I thought that was pretty good. Got a lot of love for that on Twitter. So I had to give a shout out for Brett.
I told him last night, he covered the game last night. I said, you know what? They ought to do it's Krzyzewskiville, and they should name the grounds Chi-Town grounds because you have the Dean Dome and Roy Williams Court.
I like that.
So but they can't do it now because he hasn't done anything yet.
Yeah, true.
In 15 years or 10 years or 15 years, maybe they can name the grounds Chi-Town grounds or something.
I like that, man. I don't think they're ever changing Krzyzewskiville. I think it's just too unique to the university. But I was saying, I drove through it like last week because I live in Durham, work close to Duke, and they were already camping out there. So it's obviously such a big matchup. You guys know, how big the game is. And with everything that happened last year, I know it's a new team, a lot of new faces, new coaching staff in some ways. It's still going to be a pretty hostile environment, as it always is. But I think it's going to be even more hostile there in Durham on Saturday night, 6:30 p.m. tip-off. Duke's sitting at 16-6, 7-4 in conference play, 11-0 at home, which you kind of expect with this team, but a team that's really struggled on the road, 2-4. So if this was in Chapel Hill, I'd be a lot more confident going into it. I'll just put it that way. Also 3-2 on neutral sites and have won their last 2 games. So again, we're not going to just sit here and, dive into Duke specifics and who's great and who sucks and all. We're not going to do that. I think Carolina fans want to know just more about the game and what to expect and what it's going to take for Carolina to go into Durham, steal their cookies again and win. And again, it's a big opportunity for Carolina. Coming off a loss, they need to pick up quality wins. Not only that, but I mentioned it earlier, the win in Durham kind of turned Carolina's season around in some ways. Virginia Tech was a big win too. But the one in Durham is really when it kind of felt like Carolina started to believe and show that, hey, we can beat, anybody. Because Duke was a really good team last year. We all know what happened in the Final Four as well. So, AJ, when you look at this game, it's obviously huge. That doesn't have to be stated. But is there any carryover from what happened last year? Not for this Carolina team, but is it built up more? Is it more physical? Is it more of a fight than it is is it more chippy because of what happened last year? That's something I've kind of been dissecting in my head over the last
How many guys on Duke's roster that will be in the rotation Saturday night had anything to do with last year?
What is it like?
Jeremy Roach. And Jeremy Roach played very, very well the other night, and Shire moved him off the ball, and he's starting to play really, really well. And I think they're finding themselves right now a little bit. They had a huge road win last week by 43 points or whatever we have. But Georgia Tech's a mess.
Yeah, they're horrible. Even Louisville beat them last night, I think.
Yeah, Josh Pastner's days are numbered. If they're not, they should be.
Yeah.
But he had the one flare-up, which happens
every once in a while. Yeah.
He gets credit for it. But anyway, no, I think the carryover might be in the crowd. I think Caleb's going to get all kinds of abuse Saturday night.
Yeah.
And so one of the keys, I already wrote my 5 things to watch for, how he's composed, how he plays in that environment when he's a target from the minute he walks out. Because the students will all be in there when Carolina comes out to shoot, and they're going to be on him because he hit the shot. He's the one that was the celebration with the feed to Armando and the dunk. And he's also a guy they know that if they can get under his skin, that could really just kind of derail the Tar Heels. Mm-hmm. If they could send Caleb into what people call hero ball mode, which I'm not a big fan of that. I just think sometimes Caleb just plays with his hair on fire, thinks he can do everything. And sometimes he has stretches where he does everything. Sometimes he has stretches where he doesn't. So I do think he needs to play really well for Carolina to win this game. But the fans that's where it's going to be. It'll be interesting to me that I think I have to research this just to make sure. And I'm sure Steve will have it in his notes, but I believe this will be the first time these two teams have met since 1961 without either Dean Smith or Coach K on the sideline. K missed those couple of games in 95, but Dean was on the sideline. So K hadn't missed any since he came back the following season.
Yeah, that's a good point.
1961. So you're talking 62 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's
good math right there, by the way.
And it's the second time in 2 years where they meet and neither one are ranked. And it was sandwiched in the middle was the epic Final Four game. So it's to Carolina. So, I mean, something's going to happen. Someone's going to step up and play a huge role in a long sequence or maybe more that no one's talking about right now that could be the deciding factor in the game, because it always happens like that. But the other thing, Jacob, about this game, I usually don't put a ton of stock into a team's performance when Duke and Carolina play each other by judging them, this is who they are, this is who they're not. Because the games are so separate, so distinct from the regular season.
Yeah.
That they almost have, like, Carolina will be a different team than it was last night. There'll be no connection. And then there'll be no connection to Wake Forest, is why I think in some ways the Wake game will be more revealing about who this team is than Saturday night, because there's no way they're going to be flat Saturday. Neither team's going to be flat. They're going to be ready to go. And the better team Saturday night will win. It doesn't mean the better team overall. Sometimes weaknesses are exploited. Sometimes strengths are exploited. I thought in 2012, when they went in there and just opened up a huge lead, they were just better. And every level of 5-on-5, they were better. And that club was really ascending at a very high rate. But that's not always the case. Usually it's just sort of a sidebar to the season. And I suspect that might be the case Saturday night, because you're going to have a real veteran club that people say, hey, you can't top this. Well, you have to, because you have to play them again the next year. So when the ball's tipped up, what happened in New Orleans, what happened in Coach K's last home game, doesn't mean squat.
No.
And excuse me, and if the championship or bust, run it back mindset takes the court in Cameron, and they're thinking, well, we beat you in the two biggest losses you've ever had last year, and they think that there's going to be some carryover into that, they're sorely mistaken. And that young, spry, developing team will run them out of the building. So
Agreed.
They got to play mature. They've got to use the experience to their advantage. Caleb cannot let the crowd get into him. And they got to hit shots. Got to be rugged. Keep Duke off the offensive glass. They're a really good offensive rebounding team. Armando's got to stay out of foul trouble. Filipowski's going to try to get him.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that matchup. I really am.
And I think Armando's going to want to take these little freshman punks. You know, if I'm an NBA guy, I got to turn and score over these guys. I got to be able to draw fouls on them. Maybe they'll be a little amped because they're young and commit some fouls that way. So there's a lot of storylines going in. It's Duke Carolina. It's going to be fun. It's always a blessing. I think this will be my 59th.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And I think that for me, it's vitally important Carolina gets a win because they need it for their resume. The opportunity to start the NCAA tournament in Greensboro is slipping away. And what a real screw up that is.
Yeah, no doubt.
They have to go somewhere far away instead of starting out in Greensboro, which would be a huge for them, because Carolina's history playing an NCAA tournament in some state is unbelievable. So
it's fantastic.
This is an opportunity for them to get a big time win and to maybe use the game to sort of rekindle that flame from a year ago. If there's anything I think could connect is, okay, they have no choice, but they're on a big stage. They have no choice but to play balls out and all that kind of stuff. And maybe they can rekindle some of the mindset that they rode last year and then do it as a more experienced, more mature team that I believe is more skilled than it was a year ago. They just don't all jive at the same time, which is why they have 7 losses. So who knows? Maybe that will come out of it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game. It always is. It's always such a good one to watch. And there's so many individual storylines that obviously have going into it, but obviously, you know, there's no connection between really the Duke team there and the coaching staff. Obviously, I know Shot was on the staff. What happened last year, so it's not like it's 2 veteran teams returning. And if Duke was as veteran as Carolina was, and they returned 4 or 5 starters, then it'd be a completely different storyline right now.
If Griffin and Bancaro and those guys were there, I think it would be a different.
It might be a war. I mean, someone might get arrested.
But the people in the building cares. The people in the building care, and the fact that Carolina's got all those guys back, I think it'll be interesting to see see how they handle adversity in the game. And it's going to be really neat. By the way, Ryan Young versus Pete Nance.
Yep.
Chris Collins saw that matchup a lot in practice for 4 years. So now we get to see it in a game. That'll be interesting too.
No, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of little storylines like that going into it. And obviously, what happened last year is obviously going to be a big talking point. Not really going to matter on the court, but it'll definitely matter in the stands. AJ, I want to hear your take on the Wake Forest game, because obviously Wake Forest coming up after that at Wake Forest, so 2 straight road trips for the Tar Heels in state, and obviously a Wake Forest team that struggling, but kind of in desperation mode, like the Tar Heels that need to win games to have a chance at making the tournament. A little bit more desperate than the Tar Heels are, obviously. But what is your take on that game? Because, and I'm interested to hear it. I haven't heard it yet.
Well, I hit it a second ago. I think that Carolina's performance in Winston-Salem will be more revealing about what kind of team it is than Saturday night in Durham.
Do you mean like the bounce back of having to kind of play at Duke and have to go to Wake Forest?
Yeah, because anybody there's getting ready for Duke. That should be an issue. Shouldn't be a question. I don't think they were totally ready to play Pitt. So regardless of what the outcome is Saturday night, but maybe even more so if they win, they got to turn around 3 days and got to go to Wake. Wake's going to give them everything it has because I think Wake will be playing to get back into the NCAA tournament picture. I think they've fallen out of it now. Mm-hmm. That'll be a life or death type game for Wake. So they're going to give them everything that they have. So how do the Heels handle that? If they can go into Duke and get a win and look pretty good doing so, and then go to Wake and take care of business, that's a huge statement about, okay, we talk cutting the cord a lot this year. I'm going to do it again, unfortunately, but I'm going to, just for the sake of discussion here, snip the cord to last night and say, okay, we got it. We get it. Understood. We all have those moments in life with something where we're like, I did it again. Okay, I got it. That's not happening again. Mm-hmm. So they have to validate whatever was learned last night through the next 2 games. Mm-hmm. And the one at Wake is going to be a different kind of challenge, but I think more revealing.
Yeah.
For the reasons I stated before about the Duke, because we've had the Capel shot in '95 when Duke was terrible and Carolina was really good. And then a couple of years ago with the Trey Jones shots, at the missed free throw and the way that game ended at the end of regulation and overtime. Andrew Platek played like 48 minutes in that game. That was the logo game. Both teams were blue and
horrible jerseys. Never do it again. Horrible jerseys.
It was a crime.
Yeah.
They committed a crime on the sport.
Whoever's idea that was should have been arrested. Yeah.
But the game was great, and Carolina was terrible. That's why I'm saying those games are so strange. They don't always carry a great deal of meaning in terms of who the teams are. But the Wake game will. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to be a champion, you've got to just get up here and just stay there. They showed last night they haven't done that. I thought they were doing that so.
Yeah,
they hit some turbulence and nosedive for a while, but now they need to avoid hitting the earth, get the nose turned up, plow through Durham and head to Winston-Salem and see where they are.
Yeah, season-defining 2 games in some ways. I mean,
because I just think learning. Look, my favorite part about this is learning. It's intel. Every game gives us a chance for intel, right?
The process.
So we want to learn about this team. In order to write about it and talk about them, you've got to see them and see how they handle stuff. And this is a week to see how they handle things. And it's going to be very interesting. So they could come out of this thing at 15-9, at 7-6, and that would put them in danger zone with respect to the tournament. Or they could come out of this thing 16-8, 17-7, who knows? I bet you a lot of people listening right now that are Carolina fans would take a split right now.
I think they would.
Guarantee yourself a split.
I think they would.
Given what we've seen this year.
Yeah, it's a tough stretch because not only is the Duke game on Saturday night, then you have to get you got to go Wake Forest, Sunday, Monday, you can play on Tuesday. So you don't have that much of a time difference in between the two, and trying to get back up for that game is going to be tough. And again, we've harped on the Pittsburgh game. That's another reason why the Pittsburgh game was so important. That's a game you just needed to win. You know what I mean? It's a game you really needed to win in Chapel Hill going into this. It puts you in a little bit tighter of a situation. Yeah.
Even aside from having to play, you just need to get a win.
Yeah. You just got to keep winning. And now you got to go, essentially.
They had 7 losses.
I know. It's not a.
They had 8 going into the ACC tournament last year. Mm-hmm. They lost to Virginia Tech, and they lost the title game, national championship game. That was their 10th loss. They're on pace to lose more than last year.
Yeah, and not only that, we talked about it earlier, but even your wins over Michigan and Ohio State don't really look that good because they're 2 teams that are 1 game above 500. You know what I mean? So
they're both falling apart. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't. On top of that, we talked about. I tweeted it today. Carolina's 2 best wins. You talked about earlier. It's NC State and College of Charleston. Really. I mean, I don't look into the NET stuff because I just think it's so. I know it matters going to the tournament, but it's so flawed because I think somebody was saying on Twitter to me today that like Ohio State was still ranked higher than NC State in the NET ratings or something like that. And I was like, that's just stupid.
Because the Big Ten's got a bunch of highly rated teams. So
yeah,
what was it? Clemson lost at BC and dropped 2 spots in the NET. Carolina dropped 4 because somebody they had beaten.
Yeah,
because Indiana lost at Maryland.
Yeah. It's just weird, man. Like it
doesn't make sense.
No.
And by the way, Clemson has 2 quad 4 losses now.
I know. And Carolina's what, 1-6 in Q1 games now, I think. It's what it was last night. I don't know what the Pitt game counts for in terms of a loss.
That was a Q2.
I was gonna say it can't be Q1 at home, especially. So
if it was a Q3 going in, it's Q2 now, probably, because they got a big road win.
Yeah. No doubt about it. So
there was a Q1 win for Pitt last night, and they needed that.
They did. That was huge for them.
By the way, I think they're dangerous.
I think they're a good team, man.
They can get to the second weekend of the tournament because they're guards, because they defend, and they're gonna pull you in an alley, just kick the crap out of you.
Yeah, I was impressed because
that's how you can advance to the tournament.
This is the last thing I'll say about the Pitt game, and we'll wrap it up. But I was impressed last night because it was funny in a way, because it was almost like Pittsburgh viewed Carolina as like hated Carolina, like rivalry hatred for Carolina. And it's like Carolina didn't even know it. Like Carolina was looking around like, what are you mad at us for? Like, what do we do to you guys? Like, you know what I mean? That's kind of what it felt like in a way. It's like Carolina didn't really embrace it or recognize it. Pittsburgh, a lot of hate in Pittsburgh last night. That's what I said. They came in and punked Carolina. I really thought they just were better in all facets and tougher and more energetic and more excited and more. They had a little bit more of, I'm not going to say the word on camera, a little more of that FU in them. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that this Carolina team is missing at times to keep it G-rated. But again, we can sit here and harp on the Pitt game forever.
They had it last March, but they got to get it back.
They got to get it back.
That's, again, I love every game because they give us a little bit of a different twist and turn, and it makes the story interesting and unpredictable. And who wants everything to be predictable and easy to project? I don't like that at all. So the beautiful thing about this is Tar Heels got a lot to prove. They got a lot they got a lot to prove and a lot of improving to do. And they have opportunities in front of them because the way the schedule is, they're going to be able to determine the narrative about them when they can't complain about it at all.
Yeah.
15-7 right now. They're on track to lose 11 games?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. It's not great. Yeah. It's okay at some places, but at Carolina,
if someone would have told you October 15th, this club would be 15-7 and 7-4.
I would have believed they lost in Charlottesville, and I probably could have believed Pittsburgh would beat them once or twice. But no, I wouldn't have thought they lost that many games.
Yeah, we did last thing here because we're really going long now. But we did something on the site we should do before each season where staff members projected what their record would be. I don't think anybody had them at 7 losses. I don't think anybody even had them at 7 losses for the season.
No.
So they're now. That's why I tell people, don't take anything. Don't take our predictions to the bank, man, because you're going to be broke if you do.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. It's impossible to predict too, because it's college basketball, man. You just never know what the heck's going to happen. Just look at last year, and we'll keep harping on that until we see what happens this year. But AJ, it's a good place to wrap this one up. Big games ahead, learning experiences, learning curves for the Tar Heels to still kind of deal with and face. And again, I keep saying it at every podcast. We'll see what happens because that's the only thing we can do. We'll see what happens, and we'll talk about it once it does. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the UNC Basketball Show. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well, so you know every single time we upload. We do upload a ton this time of year as well. We appreciate you guys watching as always. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.